I was sitting in my college dorm room, staring at the clock, anxiety creeping up on me. It was almost time for my evening class, and I felt a knot in my stomach. The air felt heavy with a sense of dread I couldn't shake off. I tried to convince myself that it was just nerves, but deep down, I felt like something was off. After a few minutes of pacing back and forth, I picked up my phone and called a car service to take me to the hospital. My heart raced as I thought about what might be wrong. Once I arrived at the hospital, I walked to the front desk, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. I asked the person working there if I could see a doctor. They nodded and told me I could, but I would have to wait. As I sat in the waiting room, I glanced around. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air, and I could hear the faint sound of distant machines beeping. My thoughts raced as I anxiously tapped my foot against the floor. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a doctor came to get me. I followed him to a small examination room where he asked me a series of questions. After a thorough checkup, the doctor delivered the news that would change my life forever. What they found inside my body became my worst nightmare. I had been drugged. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Someone had done something horrible to me, and I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability. As the doctor explained the details, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I could hardly process what he was saying when the name struck me like lightning. Gabby. It was her. I had been so naive, so trusting. I was in so much disgust that I rushed to the garbage can beside me and threw up. Suddenly, memories flooded back. I remembered when I picked up her wallet after she accidentally dropped it. It was a trap. She had done it on purpose to drug me and carry out her wicked plans while I was out cold. Anger surged through me, mixed with fear and disbelief. I couldn't believe someone I thought I could trust would betray me like that. Once I got my bearings, I called my parents to discuss the situation. I needed support, but as I explained what had happened, I could hear their shock and disbelief through the phone. They were just as horrified as I was, but they couldn't give me any advice. They felt helpless, and so did I. Days turned into a blur as I struggled to process everything. I knew I had to make some decisions, and they wouldn't be easy. I made two choices that would shape my future. The first was to drop out of college. I couldn't bear the thought of going back to that campus after what happened. The second decision was to press charges against Gabby. I wanted her to pay for what she did. 2 weeks later, the trial took place, and I was terrified. I had to face her again, but I knew I had to be strong. On the day of the trial, I wore my best dress, trying to muster confidence. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath and stepped up to the stand. I recounted the events leading up to that terrible day, my voice shaking but determined. I could see Gabby sitting there, her expression unreadable. After I finished, the jury deliberated. I felt like I was holding my breath for hours. Finally, the verdict came in. Guilty. Gabby was sentenced to 8 years in prison. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Justice was served, but the scars of that experience would stay with me forever. After the trial, I never went back to college. I found a regular 9-to-5 job to fill my days, trying to create some sense of normalcy in my life. But the memories haunted me. This all happened back in 2009, and I often thought about the college I once loved and how quickly it had turned into a place of fear. The college had an underground parking lot next to a lounge that was usually empty and dimly lit. Couples liked to go there because it felt secluded, but I hated it. That back door leading to the parking lot was barely lit, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible could happen there. As a horror fan, I knew that dark places like that were often the setting for sinister events. One day, after class, I was walking toward the library when a kid I didn't know approached me. He had a strange look in his eyes, almost confrontational. My heart raced as I thought about defending myself. I had my knife set with me, and I instinctively pulled out the handle, ready for anything. "Hey, wait," he called out, stopping a few steps away from me. He handed me a piece of paper. "Meet me in the lounge," it read. I looked at him in confusion and asked, "Who sent you with this note? Is it my boyfriend or someone from culinary class? Maybe a friend from high school?" He shook his head, saying he didn't know but insisted that I should go. I felt uneasy, so I questioned him further. "What does this person look like?" I demanded. He refused to give me any information. My heart raced, and I chuckled nervously, unsure of what to do. I stuffed the note into my pocket and started to walk past him toward my class. But he followed me, asking if I was going to go. I ignored him, trying to reach the library, hoping to find a public place where I could feel safe. He was relentless, trying to convince me that it was my destiny or some nonsense like that. I glared at him, picking up my pace, desperate to escape. The cafeteria buzzed with the chatter of students, but all I could hear was my heart pounding in my ears. I had just run a gauntlet of fear, and every instinct told me to keep moving. I was drenched in sweat, not just from the heat of the day, but from the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The feeling of being watched pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I glanced back, and there he was still trailing behind me, a shadow that refused to fade. Just moments earlier, I had been sitting with my friends, laughing over lunch, when I felt a cold shiver dance down my spine. I turned to find him staring at me from across the room, a boy with wild hair and a smirk that sent chills through my body. There was something off about him, something that made my skin crawl. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself I was overreacting. But as the minutes passed, my anxiety grew. By the time I reached the cafeteria's exit, the smirk was replaced by a determined look in his eyes. Panic surged within me. I fumbled for my phone to call the police, my fingers trembling. Just as I began to dial, I spotted a familiar face, my classmate, Jake. I dashed toward him, my heart racing as I gasped, "Hey, help me." Jake turned, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as he noticed the boy behind me. Without hesitation, he stepped in front of me, a barrier of safety. "Leave her alone," he said firmly. "She has a boyfriend, and she's not interested." The boy's smile only widened, revealing a row of crooked teeth. "You don't want to miss your special guest in the lounge," he taunted, his voice low and eerie. "Don't take too long." Chills ran down my spine as dread settled in my gut. I felt like I was sinking into quicksand, trapped and terrified. With Jake beside me, I walked toward the student restaurant area, and he called a few friends to join us. I was grateful for their presence, but the feeling of unease clung to me like a dark cloud. As we made our way to the lounge, 3 more classmates joined our group, creating a small wall of support around me. But when we finally reached the lounge, the room was empty. My heart sank as dread settled in my stomach. The silence felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if the walls were closing in. "I want to go home," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My friends nodded, their expressions mirroring my fear. We walked together across the campus toward the parking lot, and I called my parents for a ride. While I waited, Jake stayed by my side, offering me silent support, while another classmate reported the boy's behavior to our teachers. They sometimes used the lounge as an office, but when Jake returned a few minutes later, his face was grave. They said they would look into it. Just stay alert and report anything suspicious. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to convince myself that the incident was behind me. Then, I heard a chilling story that shook me to my core. A girl had been assaulted in the same area I had fled from. She had parked her car during finals when she decided to walk through the lounge. The school newspaper reported it, but provided few details, mentioning only that the police hadn't caught the attacker. My stomach dropped. I hoped the girl was okay, praying the police would find whoever was responsible. I rushed to report my own experience to the newspaper team, but they told me they had no record of anything like that happening. No one had reported seeing the boy. No notes had been found. My heart sank further, twisting in my chest. "Mom, you won't believe what just happened," I said, trembling as I explained the situation. She listened, her voice trembling with relief that I had followed my instincts. "I'm so glad you didn't go meet that boy," she said, her worry echoing through the phone. I could still hear the concern in her voice, and to this day, I get chills thinking about that night. The girl who had been assaulted recovered, but she was robbed and left with nothing. She had managed to escape with only minor injuries, but the police never caught her attackers. The thought of it haunted me. I never saw that strange boy again, but he lingered in the back of my mind like a ghost. I often wondered why this had happened to me. If they were after money, they had picked the wrong target. I was so broke, I could barely afford to eat. Surviving on the leftovers my classmates would share, often just crumbs or half-eaten sandwiches. I was grateful the girl had survived and relieved I had listened to my instincts. But the question remained, what would have happened if I had gone to meet that boy in the lounge? Life continued, but I felt different, haunted. I constantly scanned my surroundings, always alert for the next strange encounter. Trusting people became a monumental challenge, and the memory of that day weighed heavily on my shoulders. At work, I became a ghost, drifting through the day without truly engaging with anyone. My coworkers invited me to join them for lunch, but I often declined, preferring the solitude of my desk. The fear gripped me tightly, making it hard to break free. I buried myself in work, hoping to forget the past, but the shadow of that day lingered. One afternoon, during my break, I overheard two coworkers discussing a local coffee shop known for its amazing pastries. A tiny spark of curiosity flickered inside me. Maybe I could visit it, just to feel a little normal again. The thought made my heart race, but in a good way. The next day, I gathered my courage and decided to check it out. As I stepped inside, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries filled the air. It felt inviting, and to my surprise, I found myself relaxing. I ordered a small muffin and chose a corner table, watching people chat and laugh, their smiles infectious. But just as I began to enjoy my moment, a familiar figure outside the window made my heart drop. It was him, the strange boy from the college. Recognition sent a wave of nausea through me. My stomach twisted, and panic surged as I stood up, ready to bolt. I hurriedly paid for my muffin, my hands shaking, and rushed out the door. I glanced back, heart pounding, but he was gone. A wave of relief washed over me, mingling with frustration. Why was I still letting this fear control my life? That night, I sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and the shadows seemed darker than usual. I realized I couldn't let fear define me any longer. I had to confront it. I decided to reach out to a therapist for help, knowing I needed to process everything I had experienced and find a way to reclaim my life. In therapy, I learned about coping strategies and how to work through my trauma. It was a difficult journey, and the first few sessions were particularly challenging. I struggled to open up about my feelings and fears, but slowly, I began to find my voice. I learned that being vulnerable was okay, and that healing would take time. Months passed, and I began to feel a shift within me. I started to trust again, taking small steps to rebuild my life. I reconnected with old friends and started attending social events, allowing myself to enjoy life again. Each laugh and each smile felt like a small victory, a step away from the shadows. One day, I even signed up for a self-defense class. I wanted to feel empowered and ready to face anything that might come my way. It was a huge step for me, and as I practiced punches and kicks, I felt stronger. The thrill of taking control of my body and my safety brought me a sense of joy I hadn't felt in a long time. The following year, I found a new job that I loved. I worked in a friendly office environment, surrounded by supportive colleagues who encouraged me to be my best self. I even made a few close friends, and for the first time in a while, I felt a flicker of hope. But even amidst the newfound joy, I still had moments when fear crept back in. Late at night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by memories of that day. I sometimes thought I saw shadows move in the corners of my room, and every creak in the house made my heart race. Then came that fateful night when everything changed again. I had just gotten home from a friend's birthday party, feeling high on laughter and joy. I locked the door behind me and sank onto my couch, grateful for the quiet. The house was still, and I let out a long breath, trying to shake off the remnants of anxiety that clung to me like a shadow. But as I settled into my evening routine, a sudden noise shattered the silence, a faint tapping at the window. My heart dropped, and panic surged. I held my breath, listening. The tapping continued, rhythmic and steady. My mind raced back to that boy, the way he had followed me, the threat in his eyes. I cautiously approached the window and peered out. Darkness enveloped the outside world, and I could barely make out the shapes of the trees swaying in the wind. Then, I saw him, a figure standing just beyond the reach of the porch light. My blood ran cold as recognition hit me like a punch to the gut. It was him, the boy from my past. Fear paralyzed me, and I stumbled back, my back pressing against the wall. I fought the urge to scream, my mind racing with options. I grabbed my phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. The operator's voice was calm, but all I could manage to do was whisper that someone was outside my house. "Stay on the line and lock all your doors," the operator instructed. "Help is on the way." I moved quickly, locking every door and window, my heart racing as I fought to stay calm. But the tapping continued, growing louder, more insistent. It felt like a heartbeat echoing in the silence, a reminder that danger lurked just outside. "Why are you hiding?" the boy called through the window, his voice a twisted mockery of sweetness. "I just want to talk." A chill ran down my spine. He was toying with me, playing a game of cat and mouse. My mind raced as I considered my options. I couldn't stay in the house, I needed to escape. Just as I prepared to leave through the back door, I heard sirens wailing in the distance. Relief washed over me, but fear still gripped my heart. I peeked out the window once more, and my stomach dropped. He was gone. I didn't wait for the police to arrive. I slipped out the back door, making my way toward my neighbor's house, my heart pounding with each step. The night felt alive with danger, every shadow a potential threat. I knocked frantically, and my neighbor opened the door, her face a mask of concern. "I need help," I gasped, my voice trembling. "There's a boy. He's been following me." Without hesitation, she ushered me inside and called the police again. We locked the door and waited, the tension thick in the air. I could barely breathe, haunted by the thought that he was still out there, waiting. When the police arrived, they took my statement, their faces serious as they listened to my story. They assured me they would search the area, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. They couldn't understand the depth of my fear, the weight of my trauma. As they left, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I would be safe again. But the next day, I received a call from the police. They had found no sign of the boy. No footprints, no traces, nothing. The sense of helplessness returned, clawing at my chest. Days turned into weeks, and I began to feel like a prisoner in my own home. I canceled plans with friends, my fear trapping me within these walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But then I received an unexpected message from Jake, the classmate who had stood up for me that day. He reached out, checking in and inviting me to a gathering with friends. The thought terrified me, but I hesitated. Maybe it was time to take back my life. That night, I decided to go. The gathering was small, filled with familiar faces and laughter. As the night wore on, I felt my defenses slowly lower. Jake was there, supportive and encouraging, and I began to relax. But just as I was starting to enjoy myself, I saw him a figure standing at the edge of the gathering, just outside the glow of the lights. My heart plummeted. It was the boy, watching, waiting. My breath quickened, panic flooding my senses. I grabbed Jake's arm, my voice shaking. "We have to go. He's here." Jake turned, scanning the crowd before locking eyes with me. "Who? I don't see anyone." I looked back, and to my horror, the boy had vanished, swallowed by the darkness. I felt a chill run down my spine. Was I losing my mind? Had the fear twisted my reality? "No, I swear he was here," I insisted, my voice rising. Jake frowned, but he didn't push. Instead, he suggested we leave, and I felt a surge of gratitude. As we stepped outside, I noticed the air felt charged, alive with an eerie tension. My heart raced as I scanned the area, half expecting to see him lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing, just the quiet rustle of leaves in the night breeze. "I can't believe he's still haunting you," Jake said as we walked to his car. "Have you thought about talking to someone? Maybe a therapist?" I nodded, still shaken. "I've started. It's helping, but some days feel so overwhelming." We drove in silence, my mind racing. The encounter had rattled me, but Jake's presence provided some comfort. I needed to confront this fear once and for all. Days turned into weeks, and I kept seeing Jake more often. He became my anchor, guiding me through the darkest moments. Together, we explored new places, shared laughter, and began to build a life beyond the shadows. But the memories of that boy lingered, always just beneath the surface. The fear never fully vanished, and there were nights I lay awake, feeling the weight of darkness creeping in. One evening, as I prepared for bed, I heard a faint sound, a whisper of movement outside my window. My heart raced as I turned, expecting to see him lurking in the shadows. But when I peeked through the curtains, there was nothing. The silence was deafening, pressing in around me. I climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, but sleep eluded me. As the hours passed, I felt the weight of unease settle over me. Then, I heard it again, the tapping at the window. My heart raced, and I sat up, frozen in place. This time, I couldn't ignore it. I grabbed my phone and dialed Jake, my hands shaking as I waited for him to answer. "Hello," he said, his voice sleepy but concerned. "There's someone outside," I whispered, panic clawing at my throat. "I'm on my way," he replied immediately. I hung up, heart pounding as I listened. The tapping continued, growing louder, more insistent. My breath quickened, and I felt the walls closing in around me. Just then, I heard a loud crash. Something shattered outside, sending shards of glass flying. I jumped back, my heart racing. What was happening? The sound of sirens pierced the night, and I could see flashing lights reflecting off the walls. Relief washed over me, but fear clung to me tightly. Moments later, Jake burst through the door, his face pale with worry. "Are you okay?" he asked, his eyes scanning the room. "I think he's back," I said, voice trembling. "I heard him." Jake took my hand, squeezing it gently. "You're safe now. The police are here. Let's go outside." With Jake by my side, we stepped out into the night, the air thick with tension. The police were already on the scene, searching the area, their flashlights sweeping through the darkness. I felt a mix of fear and hope. Then I saw him, a figure lurking at the edge of the trees, watching. My heart dropped, and I grabbed Jake's arm. "There he is." The police turned, and in an instant, they were off, chasing after the shadow that had haunted me for so long. I stood frozen, heart pounding as I watched them disappear into the darkness. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, fear gripping me tightly. Then, finally, the police returned, their faces grim. "He got away," one officer said, frustration evident in his voice. "But we'll keep an eye out. We have your report, and we'll increase patrols in the area." I felt a mix of relief and disappointment wash over me. He was still out there, lurking in the shadows. The fear that had gripped me was far from over. As the police left, I turned to Jake, my heart heavy. "What if he comes back?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake took my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "You're not alone anymore. I'll be here, and we'll face this together." In that moment, I realized I had to confront my fear, to reclaim my life from the shadows that had held me captive for too long. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but I had people who cared, who would stand by me. Together, we would shine a light into the darkness, chasing away the fears that lingered. I was ready to face whatever came my way, to take control of my life and step boldly into the future. Days turned into weeks, and while the fear still ebbed and flowed like the tides, I felt stronger. I began to take small steps outside my comfort zone, joining community events and connecting with new people. As time passed, I learned to embrace the uncertainty of life, finding joy in the little moments. With Jake by my side, I felt like I could face anything. I learned that fear could be a powerful teacher, guiding me to seek strength within myself. One day, as we sat in the park, enjoying the sunshine, I turned to Jake. "Thank you for being here for me," I said, my voice sincere. "I don't know where I'd be without you." He smiled, squeezing my hand. "You're stronger than you think. We'll keep moving forward, one step at a time." And as I looked out at the horizon, I felt a sense of hope bloom within me. The shadows of my past would always be a part of me, but they no longer held power over my life. I had faced my fears and come out stronger, ready to embrace whatever came next. In the end, I learned that the darkest nights could give way to the brightest dawns. I had faced my demons and emerged victorious, and now the future felt bright and full of possibilities. Together, Jake and I would continue to chase away the shadows, step by step, hand in hand.